Hello everyone, I hope you're doing really well and thank you so much for joining me in this video. Today I'm going to talk about 4 tips, 4 things that I really feel brought on my landscape photography. Many years ago when I was learning photography, learning about landscape photography, there were 4 things. I feel they were self-discovered that I just started noticing myself, and when I implemented these things into my landscape photography, I really thought it helped bring it on to another level. So I hope you enjoy watching and find these things useful, but for now I'm going to see if I can find anything to photograph, because look at these conditions, they're just fantastic. I hope it lasts. So I've just found my first shot of this morning, and it's a really nice scene, and I'm implementing the first tip that I'll talk about in just a minute. But in front of me here we've got this path going down, and the grass is very moist with the atmospheric conditions we've got today, so that looks really nice. We've got a silver birch on the right with some autumn colour on it, and then the path goes down and then it meets another path coming in diagonally from the left. And we've got a nice little small tree growing at the end of this path where it meets the other one, and then we've got these huge Scots pines looming through the mist up to the top left of my image. So it's really nice. I'll show you in just a minute, but first let's talk about the first tip for this video. So I've captured this scene. I've taken 2 slightly different compositions. I'll have a look at those in a larger computer screen, see which one I prefer, and I'll show you the image shortly. Now the first tip, and one which I was using to take this shot, you may have already noticed it, is something that I like to call clear the grid lines. So let me explain. Back when I was learning photography, I studied photography, I read lots of books, you read lots about composition, and inevitably you're going to come across something that's very prominent regarding composition, and that is the rule of thirds. And it's a very good guideline rather than a rule. I think it's a good guideline. It's important to learn it, know why it works and know when it works. But the danger I see in it, and what I see so many people doing, is they apply the rule of thirds to literally every image that they take. When they're out, they're looking for compositions that fit and comply with the rule of thirds. And even if they see a nice scene, they're trying to work that scene around the rule of thirds and perhaps actually spoiling the composition. Now, the rule of thirds is not something I'm saying not to use it where appropriate, but what I like to do is just simply not think about it, and I clear the grid lines. So on many cameras on your display, you're going to have rule of thirds built in. And I find this a distraction. Many people are constantly trying to line things up either on the intersection points or the horizontal and vertical lines. And as a photographer, when you look at images, it's very easy to spot when somebody's deliberately used the rule of thirds. You can see when things are on those points, or they've maybe put 2/3 land, 1/3 sky, or 2/3 sky, 1/3 sea or land. It's very obvious, and I think it actually robs us of our own creativity. So what I like to do is clear the grid lines. So on my Nikon, for example, there's a button in top I can press. I think it's the actual button that starts and stops recording video. And if you're in photo mode, you press that, your screen literally goes blank. So I like to not only clear the grid lines, but clear everything off my display, such as your shutter speed, your white balance, and so on. Just completely clear it. It clears your mind, and when you're looking through the camera, you're basically using your own knowledge and your own creativity and your own instincts to frame up compositions. And I think this is fantastic. Now on my Nikon, I think I don't have rule of thirds grid line. It's actually, I think, a 4x4. But even then, you can find yourself wanting to put things on intersection points and on horizontal and vertical lines. So I really like to just clear everything off my display, especially the grid lines. And if you can do this, I really recommend you try it, and it'll let your own creativity and composition break free. So it's been pretty spectacular to watch what's been going on behind me here off in the distance. As I was walking through the woodland, I could see that the fog was clearing, everything was becoming much easier to see in the distance, and I noticed off in some of the distant hills I could start to see the tree line and so on. So I ran over here and I tried to grab a shot. I think I got something, but it was very quick, but I just tried to frame up a composition as quick as I could and grab the shot, and I think I got something quite nice, but it's completely closed in again, which is fantastic for me. I'm pleased about that because I'm wanting to have a look around this woodland. But yeah, it was pretty amazing. So I'll show you the shot that I got in just a second, but let's talk about tip number 2. There's still quite a bit of mist hanging around in the distance, but it's lifted a lot in the woodland, and unfortunately for me, I've got soaked because the rain is going quite heavy, but it's easing now. It's not a problem either because it makes the woodland look fantastic, so it's still great for taking photographs. But on to tip number 2, and that is all about light, and more specifically how my photography moved on a level when I started to think a lot more about light, and when I began to study and observe light a lot more. So when I was learning, you heard a lot about composition and you heard a bit about light, and the two go hand in hand, of course, to producing nice images. But most of the talk I heard about light, and I think it's probably the same today, is that, you know, golden hour is the best time to be out doing photography. You need to shoot early and late. Don't go out at midday. The light can be harsh. The light can be harsh in summer and so on. And that's all true and important. And I still think a lot about these things. But there's much more to light than just that. So when I was learning many years ago now, I took a lot of photographs, and I think I benefited greatly from really studying them, spending a lot of time studying them on my computer. And I think I had a fairly good eye for composition naturally, but I would often look at my images and just think there's something wrong, and often it would come down to the light. The light just wasn't right for whatever reason. Perhaps I'd shot a scene, the sun had been behind me, so it was front lit, and it just wasn't doing the scene any benefits. It would have been much better if the scene was being side lit. So then I began to analyze using apps or websites or whatever, at what time of day, at what time of year could I get the light coming from the right direction. And then I would revisit those scenes, take another image, and the benefits were immediately apparent. The other thing that really helped me was learning the benefits of a nice, quiet, soft, subdued light. I think when we're learning photography and we are thinking about light or learning about light, we're often given examples, and it can be about fantastic beams of light hitting a distant mountain or areas of a valley glowing with golden light. And we sort of think that is what light is. But like today, this is fantastic light. There's no beams of sunlight. It's overcast, it's raining, there's mist, but it's such a nice, soft, subdued light, and it works wonders for a woodland. It would work nice for shooting rivers and waterfalls and so on. So it's thinking about the right type of light for the right type of subject that you're shooting. That is really important. And then moving from obviously the studying I did at home on a computer to being out on location, when I'm taking a photograph, I'm always looking at it and just thinking, right, what is the light doing at the moment? Where is it coming from? Is it falling evenly? Is it falling on specific areas of my scene? And if it is it the correct areas, or is it sort of brightening an area and dragging my eye to the wrong part of the scene? So I'm always really looking at light and just seeing what it's doing. And when I'm out, I'm always on the look, as I said earlier, for compositions that might not be right now, but I know if the light was in a different position, I can come back at another time and hopefully get a fantastic shot. But yeah, it's something I'm always doing when I'm setting up my camera potentially to take a shot. I'm always looking at the light, and we need to be aware that even just within the space of a minute, light can dramatically change. So never get too fixated on the back of our camera or looking through the viewfinder. Also just be looking at the scene and thinking, what's the light doing? Where's it falling? Where's it coming from? Is it changing? And so on. And just by studying, observing and thinking about light in this manner, I really think it helped take my photography to another level. But anyway, that's tip number 2. Let's move on and see what else I can find today. So the rain is falling quite heavily again, but it really is a joy to be out. I'm really having a fantastic time, and I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be at the moment. I'm just watching some of these leaves falling from the trees just to my left here. It really is beautiful. But anyway, on to tip number 3. And similar to tip number 1, where I talked about learning the rule of thirds and the emphasis that's put on that, this is something else that you learn early on in landscape photography, and I feel you need to force yourself to go against it sometimes in order to preserve your own creativity. And that is that when you're learning, you're going to hear so much emphasis put on this, and I still hear it regularly today, about getting everything sharp from front to back in your landscape photography. I must stress it's really, really important to know how to do that, and obviously you're going to want to do that a lot. But you're not always going to want to do it. And many, many years ago, I learned how to be creative using depth of field, just to get a different look to some of my images, where appropriate, of course, not always. But what I like to do is look at a scene that I want to photograph, and I say to myself, do I want the whole thing sharp, front to back? And if I do, that's fine. But if not, do I think, well, I could be a little bit creative here. Which parts of the image do I want sharp? So perhaps you want your foreground out of focus, and then say the midground and background sharp. Or alternatively, sometimes you may want a really sharp foreground and then the background to be soft. And then again, if you're photographing, let's say, a tree, maybe you want what's in front of the tree, your foreground, to be out of focus. You want the tree to be sharp, and you also want the background to be out of focus, just for a nice creative effect. It's really about what you want as the photographer. But yeah, it's something I really encourage you to do. Don't always think about getting everything sharp front to back. Sometimes it's not even possible. You need to focus starting. That can be incredibly complicated depending on the scene, especially if there's a lot of movement. But just think about your own creativity. Think how you want the image to look, and use depth of field to your advantage. But anyway, let's head on. Isn't this a beautiful array of autumnal colour just behind me here? It really is amazing, and I've been enjoying just standing here looking at this scene. So I've got a composition set up, and I've really been paying attention to my own tip number 2 here in this video, which was about studying and observing light, not getting fixated with the viewfinder or your rear screen, but once you've got your composition set up, really looking at what's going on out there. And the light has been changing quite significantly. There was some heavy rain and it was incredibly overcast. There wasn't much happening in terms of light. Then the rain went off, and in the last 10 minutes or so, unfortunately I can't show it at the moment, but there's been these breaks in the cloud above, breaks in the mist where the sun has come through and just put some nice soft light onto this scene, and it really just lifted it for what I'm wanting to achieve with this composition. But there's some really nice ferns here with autumnal colours just in front of me. Beyond that, we've got this really nice sort of like a semicircle of splash of colour, and then we've got a few other trees. We've got pines, we've got birch trees, and then off in the distance we've got a peak of a hill just in the centre of my image there. So I really think it's nice, and I'll show you the photo in a little while, but let's talk about the final tip number 4. So the fourth thing that I feel really brought on my photographs to another level is when I started to pay a lot of attention to what's going on in the sky and also with the clouds when I'm taking my photographs. I think it's all too easy just to set up a shot, include some sky and think that's good enough, but you're never going to get the best results by doing that. Now, if you're in the woodland, you may be doing everything you can to exclude the sky from your shots, but sometimes we need to include some, so you need to consider that carefully. But if you're taking a standard landscape image, it's very important to think about how much sky are you including. Perhaps if it's really dramatic, lots of really interesting clouds, you may want to include a lot of sky and very little land or sea. And then the opposite can be true as well. If there's more interest going on in the land or sea and the sky's not that great, you may want to include as little sky as possible. Also consider the clouds. What are the clouds doing? How many are there? Sometimes it's nice if you can only get a single cloud and position it centrally in your frame up at the top. That can work well. But regardless of how many clouds there are in your scene, it's very important to consider where they are, because they really can affect the balance of your photograph. So I'm always looking at that type of thing. Also, when I find a scene, I'm really thinking, is this the best type of sky that I could get? Sometimes I may see a scene and I want a moody sky, but I've only got blue sky and white clouds. At other times I want blue sky and white clouds. So it's really important to consider these things. Other things that I like to do is, if I've got a composition set up and the land and perhaps a few trees are lit up by light, but we've got a very dark, moody sky behind it, that can work really well. And something which I think is quite effective is that if you're out, say, in summer, and you can tell by the land it's clearly summer, perhaps by some heather or summer flowers, but you can be fortunate enough to get a very moody sky behind it, it's not your typical blue sky for summer, then I think that contrast can work really well too and be quite eye-catching. So yeah, always pay attention to the sky, pay attention to the clouds, consider the atmosphere of the sky and what that could be doing for your photo, or perhaps even detracting from your photograph. But I hope that's helped you, and just pay attention to these things, and I hope you'll take better photographs. So I'm just having a hot drink, and the importance of this can't be understated either. On a day like this where it's quite cold, it can be very wet, a lot of rain, a hot drink can certainly lift your spirits, keep you encouraged, refresh you, and keep you looking for photographs. So that's a bonus tip, if you like, just to finish this video. But I really hope you've enjoyed watching. I hope you found it useful and maybe picked up a few bits of information that will help you in your own photography. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot, and hopefully I'll see you in my next one.